All right, well, welcome everybody. It's Matthew here. It's the 13th of the 2nd, 2016, and in my home office today I've got the incomparable Mr. McConville.
Oh my God, I must owe you money, Matthew.
So today we're
so magnanimous in your compliments.
I am indeed. That's right. So today we'll be reviewing some races, and my job today is to hand out the compliments and to actually manage the question box. So luckily I've got two screens here in my home office. I'm just going to drag the question box over to that to the other screen so Pete can work uninhibited on this one here. We've just started collecting the live data for today. We've got Musselbrook and Randwick and all of those sort of things. So the day of history you want us to look at today, Pete, is the 10th. Okay, so history, and then the 10th. And let's see that works for us. Thinking about it.
Filtering meetings.
Rightio. And we're looking at Ipswich, Sandown, Strathalbyn and Warwick Farm.
That should be right,
yep.
Yeah.
There we go. Fantastic. Not a problem. So if anybody has any questions, do go ahead and ask me. Should I make this full screen, Pete? Is that what you want?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind.
Rightio. I'll make that full screen and I'll get rid of this thing here.
And if you just click on the lock button.
Unlock it.
Yeah, it should sort of resolve the colour
band selection. Do you want to have the big chair?
All right, and, we might swap over just for the ease of operation
sure.
for the time being.
There you go. Mouse, microphone, chair. Done.
It's a height of generosity to visit somebody in their home and take over the main chair, but
it really is. It really is, and I'm such a good guy. All right, everybody. So as I said, my job is to answer and manage questions. Pete's going to go through the trading day and see if we can draw some lessons. Now, you will get the most value out of today by actually interacting here. One other thing is I saw an email go out from Abe in Melbourne. Thank you for joining us today, Abe. And Abe is organising a Melbourne support group to get together. So please do go ahead, and if you've got that email, or if you'd like to be part of the Melbourne group, do contact Linda or I, and we'll put you in touch with Abe, and we'll get that underway. All right, Pete, over to you.
Okay, all right. Well, that's very good. So what we're going to do now is go through the selections for this day and have a look at them. And as I said, then we'll go and we'll have a look at some races that were eliminated for, whatever valid reason. So we'll start with the first one, which is ARO1. And all right, so we're going to, in trifecta, as you can see, we've got the basic selections in place here, the 50, 70 and 90. Now, you'll notice that the runners down to 8 are holding 89% of the pool, which is just shy of the 90% requirement for, for third if you're applying the basic procedure. You could contemplate making an allowance, I guess, and stop your third place grouping at that point. But I think looking at the money profile here, you might be better served just to stick to the basic selections, which is given sort of 30 combinations down here. You might also sort of look at this amount of money and say, well, it's probably appropriate, given that it's only the first race of the day, to play safety first and make the additional allowance and bring the selections for second down to the lower money gap, which would rule the race out. And that's indeed what we're going to do here. I mean, as I've said to you before, we're really keen at all times to try and get away to a positive start on any days that we consider. And so it's probably better to take a conservative approach, particularly early in the day, very first race of the day at Strathalbyn, which is not a major, racing venue. And I think given what's on display here, and we don't get a lot of guidance from what we see in percentage return, because you can see quite clearly that we've got separators all the way down. So you've got a choice here. So I think given the money profile that's presenting at the 1 minute mark, which is not sort of particularly well defined and clear cut, it's probably better to apply the additional allowance and bring the selections down to there, and that would rule that race out. Righto, let's move on to the next one that we're going to look at. And now, where is it? Okay, so this is the first trading race of the day, and as you can see, we're applying the basic selections for first and second, and we're bringing the third place grouping down to number 4. Now you could bring it to the bottom if you want, but I think what we're always trying to do is concentrate the selections, the priorities in the upper field, and sacrifice wherever it's conceivable to do so in the lower field where there's not much money action. And really there's not much money action all the way down from here down. So you've got a choice here. You could stop at this point here, but because it's the 90% cut-off point, I guess, to a 1.37 multiple, or bring it down one further, or to the bottom. I would split the difference, and we'll leave it at number 4, which gives us 36 combinations. And as you can see, we've got a way to a winning start, which is what we're aiming to do. Had we traded in that first race, the AR01 race, we would have had a losing start, and that's not what we're all about. We're always trying, if we can possibly do it. It doesn't always work out that way, but if we can possibly do it, we'd like to get away to that profitable start. Okay, and you can see here, if we go into percentage return, I think the selections that we made have been backed up by the location of the relevant separators here. You've got a separator at number 5, which is fine, and that's sort of the counterpart of the money gap of 1.67 in trifecta. So looking at, there might be a question raised about this amount of money here. Do we sort of take note of that, given its competitive nature with the money for runner 3? But bearing out what I said about concentrating your efforts in the upper field, look at the money support for these 2 runners here. I mean, you could very, reasonably confidently think that you're likely to get first and second from the top 2 runners, given that they're holding the bulk of the money. They're holding well and truly over 50% of the money on their own. So I think, and all the way along, the money support has been such that working to this money gap of at number 5, I think would be more than acceptable, rather than opting to bring the selections further down. I just think that the configuration of money at the 1 minute mark justifies that. All right, we move on now to MR04. Now, once again, we're looking at basic selections, as you can see. First place group, second place group, third place group, down to runner 2. Let's go over to percentage return, see what's on offer there. Once again, we've got the reinforcing elements that of separator locations and you can see here that I guess the main bulk of the money over the last 5 intervals was held by the top 2 runners, with I guess number 1 thrown in as the predominant money group in percentage return, cumulative money group. If we go to trifecta, we do not have a separator at the second runner. Our first separator that we can use as a defining separator is at number 1, and it is quite large at 2.83. And looking at the money profile on offer at 1 minute and back at 2 minutes and so on, and particularly back over a series of intervals, I think the main money action has been for those top 3 runners. So basic selections here are going to be what we'll run with. All right, we move on now to the next race, which was this one. Now, the basic selections would involve the top 2 runners for first, top 3 runners second, and of course down to runner number 10 for third. If we go to percentage return, what have we got? We do not have, notice we don't have a separator at the second runner. That would be the counterpart of the money gap in trifecta that we saw. And so because the money for runner 3 rather, is, I suppose, in the same sort of general category as the money for runner 2, the favourite, it would be quite justifiable to say, well, in recognition of the separator locations in percentage return, I'll cover off the top 3 runners for first and second, just to as a possible sort of safeguard measure, which gives us, how many combinations? 36. And following that course of action, of course, has produced a winning outcome, because number 3 was the winning runner. So, you know, it's important. I think we're all starting to realise now that as a matter of course, the use of percentage return in helping decide the final selection outcome in races is invaluable. And we're simply sort of using that percentage return format to consolidate that.
And so if people aren't actually familiar with that, do go ahead and book a session in with Pete. Is there a mini module on that, Pete?
No, there isn't actually, Matt, and I could very easily create one, because it's quite relevant.
Something that does come up quite often. Okay, well look, currently, go ahead.
I normally don't introduce the percentage return component until somebody sends me data sheets for the first time.
Yep.
As I was explaining to one of our newer clients the other day, when I do a webinar with the first webinar with them, I don't want to complicate the issue too much. I want them to more focus on the disciplined processes involved in reviewing data as you march towards the 1 minute mark. So I think, well, I'll leave that until we have our first serious discussion about selections.
Yeah.
And because I don't want to, overwhelm people with all this sort of seemingly conflicting information.
Sure.
But I think once they understand how to review the data in a structured way, they can see quite clearly that using percentage return is very helpful to make a confident decision.
Yeah, okay. So there you go. So if you're not currently using percentage return as your way to actually make these decisions, do send Pete some data sheets and book in that session. You know, we're here to assist you and make sure that you're successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And in this particular instance, we can see what we're doing is applying the basic selection processes. Now, you could argue, I guess, that, you know, we could do that. We could go, quite clearly, we could go megafecta here, because we've got a favourite with a win dividend of $2. We have quite a large associated money gap, bigger than 2. Looking across here, you can see that there's been sort of very serious, consistent money support for this particular runner, right down to the 1 minute mark, and it's probably reached a climax at the 1 minute mark. If we go to percentage return, we see that the separator associated with the favourite is considerably bigger. But it begs the question then, why have I decided to cover off the two runners like that? And it's because of the very clear-cut money support for those two runners and number one, the favourite in particular, that I want to take advantage of. Now, if I apply mega factor, which I could do here, I'm then going to rule the race out, because I remember that if you're going to apply mega factor, or indeed banker trifecta, you've got to cover at least 80% of the money for second. Now, if I apply 80% of the money for second, I'm ruling the race out on the basis of creating too many combinations, thus denying the very strong money support for that, those upper two runners, and negating any chance of making profit because of that. So because I want to sort of recognise and acknowledge the strength of money for those two runners, I'll stick with the basic procedure, which then allows me to cover down quite comfortably number 13 for second, and bring the selections for third down to number 4 for third, giving me 54 combinations. It's all good to go, and that has produced a winning outcome. And if we go to percentage return, you can see that we don't have the any separator at the fourth runner. But I think in trifecta, it's pretty clear that certainly at this point and at this point here, the secondary money support is for those two runners. And you can see it's quite a large gap. And if we go back, and I'll just take it back in, you can see how the money gap at the 2 minute mark was 1.88. And when we go to the point of decision, it increases in size. So it reinforces the fact that there is sort of a consolidated money support for those four runners with the very strong money for the top two runners. So I guess to take advantage of that, I've opted to deny mega factor in favour of the application of the basic process.
Yeah, really good. So one thing is that you do need to make sure you know what you know the differences between the two, and apply them appropriately. If you do stand out the first number one, make sure you are covering that 80%. That's a good tip there, Pete.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would only do that, or only recommend that people do that, take that course of action, if the support for the favourite is just overwhelming. And
in cash as well as price. So you can see there's a huge gap there.
And if we just take this back, this is a classic mega factor offering, really. As we count down the intervals, watch the win dividend value for the favourite. $2.30, $2.20, $2.10, and then finally $2.
Yeah.
So increasing money support equates with decrease in win dividend value, and we've got that right here.
Yeah, really good. Now, just by the way, I got a couple of questions about this already. We are looking at exact times because we're actually looking at we actually host this program on what's called a cloud server, which means Pete can come to my house. We log in using the internet, and he can look at his the program that he uses all the time. So when we're collecting live data all day, the best way to go is to use the exact times. But if you're personally looking at the race by race, blow by blow, you can still use the the exact times. It's just that in history mode currently, exact times work better for everybody. We're working through a couple of little interesting, should we say, undocumented features of the TAB's data feed. And we're going to be, as everybody knows here, you've been around long enough, we're always working on improving it. So if you are seeing differences in data, click it across to exact times, and you'll see very, very similar results.
Yes, I mean, whether you use exact or rounded, it doesn't really matter. It's whatever you feel most comfortable with.
Yeah.
To be quite honest with you, given I'm using exact times because there are these little issues that are currently being dealt with that affect my collection in rounded time adversely. So I'm compelled to use exact times. But normally I use rounded times.
Yeah. And we've not seen any degradation of earnings or anything like that, have we?
No, not at all. I mean, It's just, I mean, whether you're using exact or rounded, the disciplined approach to the review of races is exactly the same.
Yeah. And also, you know, the program was always in exact times, and then we created rounded to make it look prettier.
Yeah.
So basically,
people feel more comfortable, I think, with rounded time.
yeah,
But it doesn't really matter, as you can see. I mean, you know, 1 minute 50, 1 minute 06.
you just know you got to bet at the next data slice after a minute 50. That's our bet time.
Pretty much.
Yeah. All right, back to you, Pete.
Okay, all right, on we go. And here we have, once again, well, here we have a clear-cut mega factor. $1.90 favourite. Look at the size of the associated money gap here, 4.11. Look at the money support for that favourite relative to the rest of the field as we count down from the 5-minute mark. Look at this support, and very strong support at clear-cut money support at the 1-minute mark. If I go to percentage return, you know, the separator's a little bit smaller, but I mean, hey, 3.86, 4.11, you can't argue with that. Selections for second and third down to number 3, covering off 90% of the money. I guess if you wish to give yourself a bit more insurance, you could bring the selections down to that point there. I wouldn't think that any further coverage would be required. I mean, bringing the selections for third down to there is probably overkill in this situation because these lower runners are attracting next to nothing, as we can see, and so it's definitely a mega factor opportunity that can be taken, given that we've got over $8,000 in the pool. And the key elements to look for if you're going to trade mega factor is not only the obvious indicator requirements of $1.80 through to $2 with associated money gap of two or more. It's the real money support in real terms, consistent money support, ideally increasing or improving as you get closer to the 1-minute mark. And as you're watching, if you've got that increasing money support, you will most likely and more likely see an accompanying reduction or progressive reduction in win dividend for the favourite, and that's an ideal sort of combination to have. What we don't want to see is the win dividend for the favourite increasing as you get closer to the 1-minute mark. So that's why it is important to review races over several intervals, because if you just look at it at the 1-minute mark and say, oh, it's between $1.80 and $2, therefore it's a mega factor, it could well be that 2 intervals back it was the win dividend for the favourite was $1.60, which means that the win dividend is increased, which would herald, or indicate a slackening off of money support for the favourite. And we are only going to trade mega factor when we feel confident that the money support for the favourite is dominant enough to support that.
Yeah, really good. Hey, I've just got a question here. Can I get you to go, Chris is just saying that the SR1 and MR2 looked okay. Can you just quickly review those, please, Pete? SR1.
Oh, SR1.
SR1. Yeah,
okay,
so
SR1 is one I'm going to look at as one that was ruled out later on.
Okay, cool.
So let's sort of go through and complete these races, and then I'll refer back to SR01.
And what about MR2? Can you do when you do those
exactly
reviews?
the same.
Oh, okay, cool, excellent. Just going through the questions here. On this race, the accumulated pool. Okay, so go back to the race you were looking at, which was, I don't remember. Which was the race you were just looking at?
AR05, I think.
AR5. Okay, and we're looking at the pool, the cumulative pool is similar to a runner 4. Is that something to consider? I go to percent return. I think this is what Chalmers is meaning. So Chalmers is saying, do we need to concern ourselves with horse number 4 because it's a similar amount of money? Oh, on trifecta. Okay, go to trifecta.
No.
I'm not sure what you mean, Chalmers.
No, I'm not sure either.
Oh, the amount of money. Okay, this is not cumulative. This is the amount of money on each horse each minute before the race jumps. So, so if we're looking at a mega factor, we're standing out the favourite being 11,
yep,
and then taking everybody else, which is grouped together. So yes, horse number 4 is very similar. Therefore, yes, it should be in that group.
Oh, very much so.
But don't worry about including it into a first place because there's a difference of almost $1,600.
No, I mean, it's all about relative appearance. Look at the money support, particularly. Well, let's look at it at the 2-minute mark and the 1-minute mark, relative to the rest of the field. I mean, it's quite clear that most of the money action is going on runner 11. I mean, and runner 11 is holding 44, nearly 45% of the money, which is pretty dominant support. So it's all about, I mean, I guess what we're trying to highlight here is what to look for when considering mega factor as an option.
If we haven't understood your question, and because this is hard for you to type and then me to get it across to Pete, if we've not answered your questions satisfactorily, if we're not answering your question, please do go ahead and send us an email with saying, hey, on Wednesday the 10th, this race, and we're looking at this particular information. Can we review that? Pete will happily do that, won't you?
Yeah. But the thing is that the choice, the decision has to be yours to make. Each and every operator of the software has got to make their own decisions about what they're comfortable with. I mean, I'm showing you the selections and the reason I'm doing this is to sort of try and highlight as much as possible the priorities that help decide the rationale behind those selections.
Cool. Hey, just to make sure, I've just had Chris say he's losing audio. Is anybody else losing audio? Just say no if you're not losing audio, please. Because I just need to, hopefully the rest of my family aren't chewing up the internet. Oh, no, everybody else is fine, Chris. Must be you. Thank everybody for responding. We've just filled up 3 pages of no's. I need to scroll back to the questions now. But that's, Peter, I just need to take the mouse for a second.
Yeah, sure.
We've only got one computer here, everybody, so I just need to go back and thank you for letting me know you're okay. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just write down those 2 races you wanted me to look at, which was, Chris, which were they? SR1 and MR2. SR1 and MR2, okay? So we'll remember that. And
I've got them written down here anyway.
Oh, you do actually?
Yeah.
Peter's organised.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Carry on, Pete.
All right, so all right, so let's just go and have, where was I? Okay, yeah, all right, we'll move on to, okay, now I don't think there's too much disputation here. Here we have, we're covering the top 3 runners for first and second, making a percentage allowance. And the reason we're doing that is quite simply because we have the basic indicators in place. We have a percentage of 69.19, which of course falls between 67.5 and 70. And we have a 1.7 size money gap, which is the minimum requirement. And most importantly, looking at the money profile presenting, you can see right back over a series of intervals, the dominant money support has been for those top 3 runners. So quite reasonable to opt for the application of the percentage allowance for second, giving us a tradable race. And we'll go to percentage return. You can see here, look at the separator size, 2.5. So it's considerably bigger in size than its money gap counterpart in trifecta. And so that's sort of a reinforcing component in helping decide to make the percentage allowance.
Very good.
All right. And finally, I think we went to, did we have percentage return? Yes, this is a percentage return race here, as you can see, SR05. Our favourites, the strong favourite, as you can see, number 10, holding in excess of 30% of the money. One other runner, number 11, a separator bigger than 1.7. Those two runners together holding more than 47.5. Look at the dominant cumulative money support here. Dominant money here, dominant money here, dominant money here, dominant all the way back. I mean, there's no question about trading in that race. And they're the kind of percentage return races that we want to sort of really, give serious consideration to. I mean, they don't all win, as you can see. I mean, this one hasn't won, but that doesn't deny the fact that the strike rate for this type of trading opportunity is very high, and so notwithstanding the losses that are incurred, it's well and truly worthwhile to seek these out, particularly with new people that just sort of finding their way as far as the trading experience is concerned.
Great.
And and to wrap it up for this day, SR, the final race here, another percentage return. You can see this time a weak favourite, number 10, sitting second in the field order, so it hasn't attracted the most money over the last 5 intervals. It's been sort of superseded by number 6. Obviously our group's got to hold at least 47.5 of the cumulative money, and that's why we're going to be covering the top 3 runners, favourite included, because of the dominant cumulative money support for those 3 runners. And so that was the final trading opportunity for this day. Now we'll go back to the earlier races that were requested, and let's have a look at.
Just unlock those selections, yeah. So yeah,
right,
cool.
Okay. So we look at first and foremost, what are the basic money gap selections in this race? Well, it's got to be the top 2 runners for first and down to runner 10 for second and third. But when we look at the money profile at the 1 minute mark, we see that there is very serious money competition coming from runners 6 and 9 for the 2 runners that we've chosen procedurally for first, applying the basic procedure. Now, if we go to percentage return, we have no separator at the second runner. No separator as a counterpart to our defining money gap in trifecta. And so those 2 obvious indicators would suggest that the application of the additional allowance would be more than relevant.
Fantastic. Which of course goes ahead and reinforces understanding the full scope of the program when reviewing races. So what was the other race?
Just in dealing with this, you can see that in doing that, we've been denied a winning opportunity. But remember that we're making these decisions prior to the race commencing. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, nor does anybody else. We're not clairvoyants. And so until such time as we can predict what the racing outcome and produce a program that takes advantage of that,
yes,
we've got to, I suppose, make competent decisions based on what we're seeing at the point of decision, which is the 1 minute mark. And at the point of decision, point of decision at 1 minute in this race, I think it would be more than justifiable to apply the additional allowance based on what we've looked at in trifecta as far as the money profile is concerned, and also what we're seeing in percentage return. I'll just take this back to the 2 minute mark, and you can see here yet another indicator in support of the application of the additional allowance. At 2 minutes, our defining money gap was 1.64. At 1 minute, it drops down to 1.55. So the money gap is reducing in size. Why is that occurring? Because the increasing money support for these two runners has caused the difference in win dividend value between runner 7 and runner 6 to narrow, right? And that's what the money gap is telling us, the size of the money gap. And I've addressed this in the past. It's always good to go back to grassroots and sort of say and ask of yourself, what do these indicators signify? What is a money gap? Well, a money gap is an indicator that shows us where there is a 50% or greater difference in win dividend occurring in the field order.
And the bigger the gap, the better.
Bigger the gap, the better.
So because we're grouping two horses together with a similar price in that 50, 70, 90 range, aren't we?
That's right. So if we notice as we review live races that we have a possible defining gap that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, that's an endorsement for that gap, because it's telling us that the money support for the runners defined by it is strengthening. If as converse to that, of course, if the gap is getting considerably smaller or progressively smaller, then maybe some consideration has to be given to possible application of the additional allowance, which is exactly what we've done here.
And that's also why we talk about running the program from the 5 minute mark out, and when reviewing data sheets, just the 1 minute doesn't tell the whole story, does it, Pete?
No, not at all. Not at all. And so to sit and think that I'll review everything and stitch everything up at the 1 minute mark and forget about doing that sort of progressive review is really denying yourself. You've really got to get a progressive perspective on what's happening and where money's going and so on, because let's face it, it's a money analysis program. That's it, pure and simple. It might, utilise the services of the thoroughbred racing industry, but when it's all boiled down, it's just a money analysis program. That's all we're doing. We're surfing the money wave, which is I think an appropriate analogy.
Nice way of putting
it. Gold Coast.
Indeed.
All right.
So the next one was MR2.
Exactly right. So let's go back to where we were in terms of applying the basic money gap procedure. And we're covering the top two runners for first. Now we could here think about a megafecta, as you can see, but of course the pool rules that out. And would we choose megafecta? Probably not, because the support for the favourite is not all that clearly defined. So we're going to cover the top two runners for first. We're going to cover the top three runners for second and bring third down to there, like that. But once again, if we look at the money profile at the 1 minute interval, we notice that there is competitive money for these two runners, 10 and 3.
Well, there's only really two gaps there, isn't there? You got the horses holding over $1,000, and then everybody else.
That's right, exactly. And so if we go back to 2 minutes, let's just sort of go look at the separator size. The money gap size, 1.71. We go down to 1 minute, it's 1.56, which speaks to what I was just saying, that we've got runners beneath that level that are becoming more money competitive. Now, do we want to put our faith in second place coming from the top three runners alone based on what we're seeing here? Let's go to percentage return and see what's happening. Look guess what? No separator as a counterpart for the money gap in trifecta. So here again, by giving priority to all these indicators, weighing up the pros and cons of what's on display, it has been decided to apply the additional allowance for second place, and of course that has ruled the race out. And this time we've ruled out what would have been a losing opportunity.
There you go. So one winner and one loser, but those red indicators show us when the profits are more often going to be on our favour.
Exactly. And so we're not going to put the cart before the horse and say, well, working back from the outcome and say, oh, well, because I would have made money had I not done that, I wouldn't have done that in the first place. I mean, that's not how it works. What we've got to do is make confident decisions based on what we're seeing prior to any results presenting. And so once we've made that confident decision one way or another, then that's all we can do. But it is, in order to make confident decisions, you've got to know what the priorities are, the full complement of priorities are that can help decide that. And that's, after all, what the main reason for these gatherings that we have.
That's right. It's to hone our skills and ask questions. So thank you for asking the question. It's important. Any questions? Now, look, I have missed a question here from Chamath, and I think that came up a few minutes ago by the look of it. So how about, Chamath, if you can tell us what race we were looking at the time when you sent your question through, do so. If not, do take a note and contact Pete, because I'm sorry, we were into answering that. Okay, SR5 we were looking at there, Pete. If you wouldn't mind just having a look at SR5. I hope that helps, Chris. So SR5, I just need to go over the other side of my desk to actually read the question.
Yeah.
So being the 3-minute mark, high money support for runner 4 at SR5. So were you making a comment or asking a question? Sorry. So go to SR5, 3-minute mark for horse number 4.
Horse number 4?
Oh, this is the one you were talking about earlier. I'm not too sure. Sorry. Oh, yeah, the $1,000 there.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure what you mean, Chamath. Would you mind having a voice conversation with Pete about that? It might be a much faster, easier way, and we can carry on. My job is to... Yeah, okay, cool. So Chamath is going to give you a call later, Pete. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, don't... I suppose in answer to Chamath, I mean, don't get fixated on one particular money value for a particular runner necessarily. You know, you've got to look for patterns when you're dealing with this program. And very often, if there's sustained strength of money support for a runner that's outside a group, perhaps a defined group at an earlier interval, very often that sustained money support will cause the runner to move up in field order such that it becomes part of a defined group that you can and would be part of a trading opportunity.
It's a series of checks and balances, isn't it?
It is.
Hey, look, I'm just Ross. I must have missed your question, so if you could retype that. And Chris, okay, so Chris is still struggling with percent return. Now, you do understand that we reorder the horses not from favourite to least favourite as it is represented in trifecta, but we reorder the horses in dollar value. So I've had some customers get a bit confused about percent return because we actually are reordering the horses in cash value. That might be the difference. If not, do go ahead and take some time and have a chat with Pete.
I think Chris has had, I sent Chris an email requesting he send me a screenshot because he seems to, there's a suggestion that what he's seeing on his screen doesn't conform with what's presenting.
Do that, please, Chris. You know, we want to make sure that you're operating successfully, and because it might be there's 1,000 reasons, and sometimes it's just a setting or a time thing or whatever else. So Ross is asking for trifecta settings for $100 trifecta bets. Do you want to talk about that, Pete?
Ross, I will call you later today. about that.
Okay.
I've got down to call you to discuss that with you.
Fantastic. And Chris is taking those screenshots now and emailing it to you.
Good. Okay. I won't, rather than take up time now, I will, because there's more to it than just sort of making adjustments. You realise that if you're going to use $100 trifecta bets, you can throw out, you get out of sync with what, with the selections that you will see in these webinars, because we're working to, in $400, we're working with 400 units of $1. If you're working with 200, you're working with 400 units of 50 cents. Now, if you're using $100 $1 units, you throw everything out, and that means the calculations that the program makes, and so therefore you've got to make certain adjustments to max the guidelines that you work to, and I'll discuss that with you later on.
Very good. Well, look, and Bruce is just saying he would have removed it, and so if you're doing $200, do 50-cent intervals, so you actually get the optimum number of selections.
Yeah,
please.
that's. I will talk about that. Don't do 200 units of $1 because you're for two reasons. Firstly, we're using 50-cent multiples because that enables the program to concentrate more money on the trifectas that are more likely to produce the winning outcomes.
Yeah.
So if you're spreading 200 $1 units, you're spreading them. You tend not to concentrate the money in the upper field. The money is more evenly distributed, which means there is a certain wastage, if you like, of your investment on trifectas that are highly unlikely to be successful.
Yeah, because there's only 3 units worth of value that can occur at the bottom of the field, being 1, 2, or 3. Whereas if you're betting with at 50-cent multiples, you can actually break that up into 6 units, which gives you a better coverage at the top end of the field.
Very much so. So make sure that the settings are, if you with $200, it should be 400 units of 50 cents each.
Perfect.
Okay, all right.
Well, we're almost at the hour mark there, Pete.
Yeah, I think we'll just run with one more. I wanted to show this one here. No, I don't know. I'll just refresh my memory here. Yes, this is, I remember this one. I'll just go back here. Let's make sure this is the right one. Yeah, now let's have a look at this particular percentage return. Now this was ruled out. Now you might say, well, why is that? Well, let's look at it at 1 minute. Now, I mean, I suppose we could do that, and that would be quite acceptable. Runners 11 and 6 is our group, and holding 54% of the money. Big defining separator here. Dominant money support here. But when we go here, you can see that the money support isn't as strong. I mean, we've got a bit of competition from runner 1. Now, if I go back to the 2-minute interval, look at the size of the separator that defined that group of 2 runners, 4.06. And when we go to the 1-minute interval, it becomes 2.60, which is a considerable reduction. So even though the dominant money is for these 2 runners, this could be an occasion where perhaps precedence should be given to what we're seeing in terms of the money profile at the 1-minute mark, resulting in the inclusion of runner 1 in our trading group, which would rule the race out on the basis of profitability. Now, I'm not saying that's the definite thing that has to be done. I'm just posing a question mark here and showing you how indicators can sort of help us to make a decision one way or another. And at all times, if there's any shadow of doubt, if you reach a point where you're looking at the priority indicators and thinking to yourself, I'm conflicted. I don't know, really whether I should do this or take another course of action. Then it's probably better to opt out of the race.
Yeah, really good.
Rather than throw caution to the wind.
Okay.
And so if somebody said, well, I would be quite happy to trade with those two runners, fine. But I think there is some sort of justification for, in this instance, considering the addition of the extra runner, based on what we just saw there with the big, very dramatic reduction of the separator size.
All right, so that's a great lesson. Talking about separators a lot today and their movements as we go towards the beginning of the races. I like that. Hopefully, everybody got some value out of this, and see the same faces every week or every 2 weeks who are successful with the program being here and interacting, which we really appreciate. And this is still everybody's forum to ask questions, have comments, and bring up ideas. This is what we're here to do: is make sure everybody is successful with the program, aren't we, Pete?
That's right. That's right. It's all about. It's not about us waving the big stick and saying this is how it must be done and there is no other way. What we're saying is adopt a structured, disciplined approach. Make sure you review the full complement of priority indicators to make a confident decision.
Fantastic.
And if you do that, then you're going to be happy with the outcome.
Excellent. Well, on that note,
I will vacate the chair, Matt.
No, I'll just grab the mouse and end it. If there's no more questions, if there are questions, do go ahead and email Peter, and I'm sure that people will have a look at Chris's emails today.
Surely, and Ross, I will get to you and give you some sort of an elaboration on what course of action to take.
Fantastic. Well, everybody, thanks very much today. Really appreciate your taking time out of Saturday to invest in yourself, in your business, being IQ Pro. You have a great weekend.
Yeah, have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you in a fortnight's time. Bye now.
Bye now.